The German government collapsed, and it seems like this is one of the consequences of the German economic crisis. And looking forward, it seems like the crisis is going to get worse and worse, because the crisis didn't just start yesterday. It started a few years ago, and it's getting worse and worse, and could actually lead to the catastrophic collapse of the German economy. So here in this video, I'm going to explain to you what exactly has happened, what are the reasons behind those crises, and what could actually happen to the German economy moving forward. You see, the German economy or the German government is a parliamentary democracy, which means that if you want to rule the government, you want to have the majority in the parliament, and that majority is usually created with coalition of different parties. But now Germany is in a crisis because on one side it wants to keep supporting Ukraine and investing more into renewable energies because it no longer can import cheaply Russian oil and gas. On the other side, it doesn't literally have that much money to do that. And there is a law in Germany that says that you cannot possibly borrow more than 0.35% of the GDP. So there is a $60 billion shortfall in the budget. And that was the disagreement between the Chancellor of Germany and the former Minister of Finance. So when there was a disagreement, the Chancellor simply fired the former Minister of Finance, and that actually led to the wave of resignation within the German parliament and that coalition, and the government simply broke up. But that's just the first problem in its crisis, because that crisis is getting bigger and bigger, and it doesn't seem like Germany is going to solve it in the foreseeable future. And in order to understand that, we have to understand the real problem in Germany, and that is inflation. Now, inflation has been a problem pretty much everywhere, whether it's the United States, Canada, the entire Europe, but in Germany specifically, it got much worse than most of the other countries. Now, first of all, this inflation has been the worst since 1951. I want you to take a look at this chart, and you can see that in October of 2022, it has reached around 8.8%. It even crossed like 9%, and that was literally the highest since I guess like 1950s, which made it the worst inflation since then. Of course, there has been a wave of different kind of inflations during 1970s, 1980s, and even like 1990s. But the problem this time is that, you see, when you take a look at the numbers of inflation, they usually include within it CPI, Consumer Price Index. And the Consumer Price Index is very misleading statistics because it does not include within itself the energy prices. And energy prices influences everything. Because if you check the CPI, which are just like a list of products that they include within itself. So when you have energy prices going up, it influences the prices of everything. It does not. So for example, in CPI, they do not include electricity. They do not include energy sources. And a lot of businesses, a lot of factories heavily depend on energy in order to keep manufacturing, especially when we talk about an economy like the German economy that heavily relies on manufacturing. So without like natural gas, without oil, all of these factories will actually close down, which is actually creating so much pressure on the German economy. So let's take a look at the sources of energy within Germany. So first of all, of course, oil has been playing an important role within it, and that is not a surprise. In the second place goes natural gas, and then coal and renewable energies. Looking at this graph, it doesn't seem anything abnormal. That is the case in pretty much a lot of other countries, including the United States. But unlike Germany, the United States is energy sufficient. It's a net exporter of oil and gas. And that's not the case with Germany. Germany doesn't actually export oil. And that actually creates a fundamental problem because over the last like 50 years or so, Germany has been heavily depending on Russia for its natural gas and oil. They have built those pipelines from the deep forest of Siberia into the heart of Germany, which made the transportation of that energy, natural gas and oil into the Germany at a much cheaper price than they're buying it right now from the United States. Now, what you have to understand is that because Germany stopped buying natural gas from Russia for a penny on the dollar, now they are buying it 5 times more expensive from the United States. What do you think has happened to energy prices? Now, the same thing you can say with oil. Yes, they still can purchase oil from not just the United States, but also Middle East, But the problem is that they used to buy that oil for the last 30, 40, or even 50 years from Russia at a fraction of the price that they are buying it right now from Middle East and the United States. And those German factories have built their entire businesses around affordable energy prices. Of course, Germany has tried to increase its coal production, but it is going to take years for Germany in order to be energy self-sufficient. And in fact, it's never going to be something like that because, by the time it builds that entire infrastructure, especially when we talk about renewable energy, it is going to take decades for Germany to do that. So I want you to take a look at these numbers and you can actually see how bad the situation is. So if you go back, for example, in 2019 and you take a look at the natural gas prices, it was like 0.062 cents. Now compare this number to 2023, for example, and it's not really that different from 2024 with this 0.140. So the price literally doubled. Take a look at the renewable energy, it's 0.43. So take this price and compare it to the natural gas that Germany used to buy from Russia. Now, take a look at this graph. This compares the natural gas prices in the United States and Europe. And you can see that, for example, prior to the 2022, prices were pretty much close. Yes, of course, maybe back in 2017 and 18, natural gas prices were slightly higher in Europe compared to the United States, but nonetheless, the difference wasn't really massive. And then you go, for example, to 2022, and you can see that it has spiked tremendously. The peak is probably around 70 or 75. Yes, they have diversified their sources from the United States, Qatar, and other countries, but nonetheless, it didn't really, the difference is still massive between these two countries. Imagine something like that is happening in the United States where energy prices double or triple or grow 5 times. That is entirely unsustainable. Part of the reason that Donald Trump, for example, won the presidency is because inflation got out of hand and energy prices increased. But the increase in the United States is absolutely nothing to the increase in energy prices in Europe, especially in Germany. And I want to point out to the fact that this is not the entire story. It's much worse than this because energy prices, the reason that they didn't grow, like, for example, 3 times or 5 times is because 70% of energy production in Germany is subsidized by the government. So without this 70% subsidies from the government, prices would have actually increased maybe 3 times, maybe 5 times. I can't literally know the limits. So gas prices also, there is also a price cap by the government that you cannot sell it for more per kilowatt hour for more than 14 cents, which means that all those businesses that are actually importing energy to Germany are also suffering because there is a limit to how much, what price they can actually possibly charge. So many of them actually also went out of business. So Germany is in a real crisis, in a crisis that it cannot possibly afford. Moving forward with each year that it's not importing its cheap oil and gas from Russia, it is suffering tremendously, spending billions of dollars in order to subsidize all of those industries to make energy affordable within the country. Because if you kind of take a look at the German companies right now, you have really terrible news. Like Volkswagen, which is literally a logo of Germany in some way, is closing 3 factories in Germany. And Volkswagen is just one out of many examples. There is a long list of companies closing down their factories within Germany because it's just impossible to produce the exact same thing and compete globally when you have such a high energy prices. Now, don't forget that Germany is facing a serious competition from the United States, from China, and now from India, and from a long list of other countries. And when you don't have a sufficient, affordable energy prices, there is no way you can actually compete with them. If you pay attention at the German economy, it's an export-driven economy. It's literally relying on the fact that it's building high-tech like machinery, cars, pharmaceutical products, and exporting them to wealthy countries. And that's how Germany actually grows its economy. That's what makes Germany so unique compared to other countries. When you think of Germany, what exactly do you think about? You probably think of BMW, you think of Mercedes, you think of Volkswagen. But now these are the companies that are leaving Germany. Now, Volkswagen and Mercedes to a certain extent are surviving because they're mostly focused on luxury market. And when you're focused on a luxury market, you have higher margins than more economy cars, such as Volkswagen cars. So to a certain extent, they still can survive the storm that Germany is going through. On the other side, it's also about the machinery. Like Germany produces all those machines for other factories for across the globe. And in order to do that, again, you need affordable energy prices. Now, I don't know for a fact how long those companies will actually keep operating at such a high energy prices, but I don't think they can operate for a long time. And that actually creates a fundamentally different problem. Now, energy prices also disrupts supply chains. What makes the modern economy so efficient is the fact that we have efficient global supply chains, and those global supply chains heavily depend on affordable energy prices. And when they don't exist in your country, suddenly you have a problem because prices of everything are actually rising. Yes, a lot of the things are not included within CPI. So when you take a look at the inflation report, you take a look and it's like less than 3% in 2024, for example, but it's actually misleading, because that actually doesn't really shows the fundamental problem within the economy. And that's what Germany is actually suffering right now. Factories are leaving, people losing their jobs, and how bad it will get, it's only a question. Now, another thing to pay attention is that Germany failed to modernize its economy in the last 30 years. You see, if you just go back, for example, to 1990s, what you will clearly see is that German companies are at the top of the list. Yes, they were still behind the United States. They were still behind maybe a few other countries, but nonetheless, Germany was at the top of the list. Right now, at the top of the list is the United States. I mean, it still remains at the top of the list. And then you have China that is sweeping German companies and German brands out of the market because they are producing the exact same thing at a fraction of the price with new innovative technologies. Now, let me give you a very simple example. Germany is known for its cars, and for the last over 100 years, they have been the leaders in manufacturing cars. But now we have moved into electrical cars. Who is the leader in electrical cars? Even the United States cannot possibly compete with China, leave alone Germany. Yes, Germany produces quality cars, and maybe the demand for gasoline cars is still going to be for the next 50 years, for example, but that demand is going down because the vast majority of the cars in the streets are going to be electrical cars. And the automotive industry is just one example. Since China became the factory of the world, they started building all of those high-tech machinery and now exporting those high-tech machinery. In the past, for example, if you just go back 20 years ago, China used to import its trains from Germany. But right now, Europe is importing its train from China because China is building them at a much better quality and at a fraction of the price that you can actually produce them in Germany or most of the European countries. These are the largest companies by market cap worldwide. Of course, at the top of the list, most of these companies are US companies. We are talking about Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Tesla. Yes, there is one Saudi Arabian company, which is the largest oil company in the world. But besides it, we also have TSMC, which is a Taiwanese company. But TSMC is almost a US company because it only exists because of the demand from US companies. And now TSMC is forced to bring its manufacturing to the United States because there is a huge risk that there might be a conflict with China, and that could be the end of the company. So it's much better for them to actually shift their manufacturing to the United States. I mean, if you just scroll down with the list, you don't see a single German company. The first German company comes at the number 31, which is SAP, valued at $300 billion. So the largest US company is like what? $3.5 trillion. And the United States has multiple companies at over $3 trillion valuation. And now Germany has like a single company that's not even $300 billion, and it's not even, an AI company or competing within AI industry or anything like that. Yes, it's a tech company, it creates software, but it's nothing close. It has no chance to compete with any US companies. Not any US companies, but if you're talking about the US companies that are competing globally. And you might ask yourself, what exactly has happened? I mean, I can just go on with the list, and you won't actually find a lot of German companies. It's probably the only German company in this list. The problem is that Germany, over the last 25 or 30 years, has created a very unfriendly environment for businesses. And these are the reasons. First of all, high taxes. Taxes in Germany and in general within the European Union are much higher than most of the world. Some of the highest taxes that you can ever find are located in European Union, and Germany is at the head of it because Germany has created a lot of welfare program. For example, if you go to Germany, schools are free, universities are free, public transport is very affordable, you have great infrastructure. So healthcare is free, for example, to a certain degree. But the same thing does not exist in the United States. Now, in order to afford all of that within Europe, you need a lot of money. You need high taxes. Without those taxes, you cannot possibly actually afford free healthcare or free higher education. And that's why some of those things do not exist in the United States, but taxes in the US are lower than in Germany. Now, a lot of regulations. Do you know how difficult it is to hire somebody in Germany and then fire them? It is a nightmare. You cannot possibly simply fire people like you can do, for example, in the US and most of the world. If you want to fire somebody in Germany, you have to give good reasons. And even if you fire them, you probably have to pay them for a very long period of time, even though that they're no longer work for you. If you want to hire a talent and you don't have it in Germany and you can't find it within the European Union, it's so difficult to get it from outside the European Union because there's a long list of demands that you have to comply with. Low productivity, that's very something you can just Google it out and you'll see that productivity in Germany or in Europe in general has been declining compared to China that has been catching up and the United States that has been growing tremendously over the last 30 years. And the competition from China and US. I mean, you can relax, you can increase your taxes, create all of these welfare programs, but the rest of the world isn't actually waiting for you, doesn't really cares about you. If you actually slow down, productivity goes down, you spend all of that money on welfare programs, while other countries are spending heavily on productivity and innovation, nobody's going to wait for you. And that's why US and China simply just got so far ahead of Europe that Europe is just finding out. And now this is the worst time for them to find this out. Why? Because now they're having an energy problem. And without energy, you cannot possibly compete in all of those industries. And now you have less money than you ever had because a couple of years ago, there was a pandemic where you spent trillions of dollars in order to save your citizens and save the economy and to prevent the economy from stopping because of that pandemic. This is literally the worst time for Germany, the worst period in German history for them to face something like that. But this is just one of the problems because the more serious problem is probably a demographic problem that Germany is facing. Now, if you take a look at this graph, you clearly see that Germany isn't actually looking forward to a really great future because the vast majority of the German population is around 50 to 60 years old. And the number of people who are going to replace these people aren't really as much as they actually should be in order for the system to work. You see, the pension system in any country is like a huge pyramid scheme. So the people who actually retire are being taken care by people who are working right now, and the young people who will one day retire will be taken care by the next generation. Now, in the US, for example, it's called Social Security. In a different country, it's called something different. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but there is a pension system for the system to actually work. So if you kind of take a look, you find out that the retiring age within Germany is 62 to 67, which means that by the next 5 years, a third of the German population are going to retire. So a third of the German population are not going to work, and another, 2/3 will have to sustain those people. What does that tell you? You need more taxes, you need to raise taxes, because birth rates in Germany have been falling down. Like right now, and for the last 50 years or so, they have been around 1.25. Maybe slightly more than that, maybe 1.3 or 1.35 at best. If it wasn't for immigration, the German population would be much worse. But you can't simply keep bringing people from outside, because you need to a certain degree maintain your culture. You need to maintain to a certain degree the social system that you have. So immigration isn't always the answer. Yes, you might bring a few million people, maybe 10 million people over the next 30 years, but that's the plan. Overall, you need a sustainable birth rate, which does not exist in Germany. This is not the problem just in Germany. This is a problem pretty much everywhere. Take a look at China, take a look at the United States. But unlike, for example, Germany, United States has a very high immigration rate. I mean, United States is founded by immigrants, but that's not the case in Germany. Germany has like a German identity. You have to be to a certain degree German, and it's very difficult to integrate those foreign people into the German society, which actually creates a real challenge. And that's why you cannot immigrate. I mean, you cannot literally bring that many people to Germany like you can, for example, with the United States. So by looking at this graph, you can clearly see that Germany is not in a position in order to lower down taxes. But if you don't lower down taxes, you won't be able to attract so much talent from across the globe. And if you cannot possibly do that, then you cannot compete with China. You cannot compete with the United States. You cannot provide all those tax brackets. So while Germany right now is literally ignoring all of those factors and trying to support more Ukraine, now I'm not saying anything whether it should do that or not. That's an entirely different question. We are looking at this purely from the economic perspective, and it's not something that Germany can afford in the foreseeable future. So within 5 years, Germany might actually find itself in a much deeper crisis than it's right now. Otherwise, it has to do something today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.